Here is a requested review long in the making. The movie which really cemented James Cameron as a force to be reckoned with. It's incredibly easy and obvious to say that Aliens is one of the best sequels that's ever been made. Most people who've seen this film would definitely say that. What's less common is that some people call this the best film in the entire Alien franchise. I fall under both those categories. Now don't get me wrong, the first Alien was incredible. It's still one of Ridley Scott's best films. So when a young James Cameron was brought in to make the sequel, it turns out he was met with a lot of hostility from almost all sides. He battled his cast and crew just as hard as he fought against the clock to get his vision across. And he succeeded. Just like The Godfather Part 2 and Empire Strikes Back, Aliens takes the original film's concept and provides a bigger scope. At the start of Aliens, Ellen Ripley is rescued from the end of the first movie and is awoken from her cryosleep. She finds out that she's been missing for over 50 years, and the planet where the alien was from was colonized by the company she worked for. However, the colony has gone silent, so the company that sponsored it sends a team of Marines, an android, and Ripley herself to go find out what's going on. While the first movie was basically a horror film in space, this movie shifts most of the horror into a war film. There's an article on Cracked.com which compares the plot of this movie with the Vietnam War, and there's definitely some good points there. We get the theme of greedy corporations sending brave young soldiers to a dangerous location while being led by inexperienced commanders, only for things to take a dark turn. Now that I think about it, it sums up a lot of wars, not just the Vietnam War. Anyway, like any good sequel, Aliens introduces us to a plethora of fascinating and unique characters. Where the first movie had an android named Ash, here we get another one called Bishop, played by Lance Henriksen. Of the Marines, the three main ones are Vasquez, played by Jeanette Goldstein, Hicks, played by Michael Biehn, and Hudson, played by the late Bill Paxton. It's beyond a doubt that Paxton has had an illustrious career as a character actor, years after Aliens. But I have to say, he really did a phenomenal job standing out in the crowd, and this role is the one I think of first when I think of Paxton. Incredibly, a lot of his lines were improvised, including the famous 5-word line that everyone thinks of when they think of this movie. And it's those 5 words that always come up in my head when I think back to Paxton or this movie. But all that aside, one thing that really makes the film resonate for me is the development and continuation of Ellen Ripley. Ripley starts out haunted by the events of the first film, as she would be, and we find out that she's also outlived her own daughter due to being asleep for over half a century. These two things come together when she arrives at the planet and finds an orphaned little girl called Newt, who's only barely survived hiding from the aliens all this time. As things get worse and worse, Ripley goes from wanting as little to do with the expedition as possible to confronting her worst fears to save Newt. Her character arc is incredibly satisfying, and Sigourney Weaver does a phenomenal job reprising her character. It goes without saying that Aliens is up there with the other great sequels in cinematic history. It follows an original classic, but also manages to stand on its own merits without leaning on the first film. It broke ground with putting a female lead in an action movie, and it also landed her an Oscar nomination. Really, I think we can all agree that Aliens is where the franchise should have stopped. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, the upcoming Neil Blomkamp movie is the very first time that they're making a sequel to Aliens. The very first time.